Good evening and welcome to our daily devotional reading and a Happy New Year. Welcome to the light side. Today was one of the 2 days of the year that the force was in balance. It will not happen again until September. And I've cracked my heart open to let the light in. Yes, hoping. There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Let's crack open Plato. Socrates. But, oh my friend, when he draws the other into upper air and gets him out of his pleas and rejoinders into the contemplation of justice and injustice in their own nature and in their difference from one another and from all other things, and from the commonplaces about the happiness of the king and of the rich man to the consideration of government and of human happiness and misery in general, what are they, and how a man is to attain the one and avoid the other? When that narrow, keen, little legal mind is called to account about all this, he gives the philosopher his revenge, for does it by the height at which he is hanging, whence he looks down into space, which is a strange experience to him, he being dismayed and lost and stammering broken words, is laughed at, not by Thracian handmaidens or any other uneducated persons, for they have no eye for the situation, but by every man who has not been brought up a slave. Such are the two characters, Theodorus, the one of the free man who has been trained in liberty and leisure, whom you call the philosopher. Him we cannot blame because he appears simple and of no account when he has to perform some menial task, such as packing up bedclothes, or flavoring a sauce, or fawning speech. The other character is that of the man who is able to do all this kind of service smartly and neatly, but knows not how to wear his cloak like a gentleman. Still less with the music of discourse can he hymn the true life aright which is lived by immortals, or men blessed by heaven. Theodorus, if you could only persuade everybody, Socrates, as you do me, of the truth of your words, there would be more peace and fewer evils among men. Socrates, evils, Theodorus, can never pass away, for they must always remain something which is antagonistic to good. Having no place amongst the gods in heaven, of necessity they hover around the mortal nature and this earthly sphere. Wherefore we ought to fly away from earth to heaven as quickly as we can. And to fly away is to become like God, as far as this is possible. And to become like him is to become holy, just, and wise. But, oh my friend, you cannot easily convince mankind that they should pursue virtue or avoid vice, not merely in order that a man may seem to be good, which is the reason given by the world, and in my judgment is only a repetition of the old wife's fable, Whereas the truth is that God is never in any way unrighteous. He is perfect righteousness. And he of us who is the most righteous is most like him. Herein is seen the true cleverness of a man, and also his nothingness and want of manhood. For to know this is true wisdom and virtue, and ignorance of this is manifest folly and vice. All other kinds of wisdom or cleverness, which seem only, such as wisdom of politicians or the wisdom of the arts, are coarse and vulgar. The unrighteous man, or the sayer and doer of unholy things, had far better not be encouraged in the illusion that his roguery is clever, for men glory in the shame. They fancy that they hear others saying of them, "These are not mere good-for-nothing persons, mere burdens of the earth." But such are men as men should be who mean to dwell safely in a state. Let us tell them that they are all the more truly what they do, not think they are because they don't know it. For they do not know the penalty of injustice, which above all things they ought to know. Not stripes and death, as they suppose, which evildoers often escape, but a penalty which cannot be escaped. What is that? There are two patterns eternally set before them, the one blessed and divine, the other godless and wretched. But they do not see them, or perceive that in their utter folly and infatuation they are growing like the one and unlike the other, by reason of their evil deeds. And the penalty is that they lead a life answering to the pattern which they are growing like. And if we tell them that unless they depart from the cunning, the place of innocence will not receive them after death, and that here on earth they will live ever in the likeness of their own evil selves, and with evil friends, when they hear this, they, in their superior cunning, will seem to be listening to the talk of idiots. Very true, Socrates. Too true, my friend, as I well know. There is, however, one peculiarity in their case. When they begin to reason in private about their dislike of philosophy, if they have the courage to hear the argument out and do not run away, they grow at last strangely discontented with themselves. Their rhetoric fades away, and they become helpless as children. These, however, are digressions from what we must now desist, or they will overflow and drown the original argument, to which, if you please, we will now return. For my part, Socrates, I would rather have the digressions, for at my age I find them easier to follow. So do I. But if you wish, let us go back to the argument, Socrates. Had we not reached the point at which the partisans of the perpetual flux, who say that things are as they seem to each one, were confidently maintaining that the ordinances which the state commanded and thought just were just to the state which imposed them while they were in force? This was especially asserted of justice, but as to the good, no one had any longer the hardihood to contend of any ordinances which the state fought and enacted to be good, that these, while they were in force, were really good. He who said so would be playing with the name good, and would not touch the real question. It would be a mockery, would it not? Certainly it would. He ought not to speak of the name, but of the thing which is contemplated under the name. Right. Socrates. Whatever be the term used, the good or expedient is the aim of legislation. And as far as she has an opinion, the state imposes all laws with a view to the greatest expediency. Can legislation have any other aim? I think the other translator says utility, because I was thinking of utilitarianism when I was bracketing this off. Socrates. But is the aim attained always? Do not mistakes often happen? Yes, I think there are mistakes. The possibility of error will be more distinctly recognized if we put the question in reference to the whole class under which the good or expedient falls. The whole class has to do with the future, and laws are passed under the idea that they will be useful in after time, which in other words is the future. Very true. Socrates. Suppose now that we ask Protagoras or one of his disciples a question. "O Protagoras," we will say to him, "man is, as you declare, the measure of all things, white, heavy, light. Of all such things he is the judge, for he has the criterion of them in himself. And when he thinks that things are such as he experiences them to be, he thinks that what is and is true to himself, is it not so?" Yes. And do you extend your doctrine, Protagoras, as we shall further say, to the future as well as to the present? And has the criterion not only of what in his opinion is, but of what will be? And do things always happen to him as he expected? For example, take the case of heat. When an ordinary man thinks that he is going to have a fever, and that this kind of heat is coming on, and another person who is a physician thinks the contrary, whose opinion is likely to prove right? Or are they both right? He will have a heat and fever in his own judgment, and not have a fever in the physician's judgment. Theodorus, how ludicrous. Socrates. And the wine grower, if I'm not mistaken, is a better judge of the sweetness of or the dryness of the vintage, which is not yet gathered, than the harp player. Certainly. And in musical composition, the musician will know better than the training master what the training master himself will hereafter think harmonious or reverse. Of course. And the cook will be a better judge than the guest, who is not a cook, of the pleasure to be derived from the dinner which is in preparation. For of present or past pleasure we are not as yet arguing. But can we say that every one will be himself the best judge of the pleasure which will seem to be and will be to him in the future? Nay, would not you, Protagoras, better guess which arguments in a court would convince any one of us than the ordinary man? Theodorus. Certainly, Socrates, he used to profess in the strongest manner that he was the superior of all men in this respect. Socrates: to be sure, friend. Who would have paid a large sum for the privilege of talking to him, if he had really persuaded his visitors that neither a prophet nor any other man was better able to judge what will be and seem to be in the future than everyone could for himself? Who indeed? And legislation and expediency are all concerned with the future, and every one will admit that states, in passing laws, must often fail of their highest interest. Quite true. Then we may fairly argue against your master that he must admit one man to be wiser than another, and that the wiser is a measure. But I, who know nothing, am not at all obliged to accept the honor which the advocate of Protagoras was just now forcing upon me, whether I would or not, of being a measure of anything. Theodorus: that is the best refutation of him, Socrates. Although he is also caught when he ascribes truth to the opinion of others, who give the lie direct to his own opinion. Thus far our scripture of the evening. So the song that's now in my head is that one, like, I don't know much, but I know I love you. Mostly because of I don't know much part. I feel a bit confused by tonight's passage, to be honest. There's a lot of thoughts combating in my mind. And I'm not sure if those of you who have like an analytical background, well, strictly speaking, I do too, but in analytical therapy, but an analytical philosophy background, if you ever experience such a mind that is, it's as if you can see their thoughts, but they're a bit blurred and like all over the place. And that's why I sometimes just throw things out there and hope it makes sense. So I found it was interesting that the two paths, the good and the evil, the wise and the foolish, was discussed today. Seeing that today is the equinox and the balance of forces is in play. I do not think that darkness is evil, I have to say. It might have been misleading, and my previous ramblings on the dark side. I will never condone the slaying of younglings. I'm a woman. I will tear you to pieces with my bare hands if I catch you do such a thing. That's what we women do. We protect the young. But clearly, today in our text, our scripture, the two paths that is well known in our own breasts as much as in our culture, I imagine, is presented as a side note to what is knowledge. Because really, how do we know which path is good and which is evil if we do not even know what knowledge is? What is true? What can we know? and maybe totally, absolutely connected to that. I think that's why my mind is so entangled tonight, because everything is, at least in my mind, connected. Playing with the name instead of touching the real specifically refers to justice and injustice. And I will link this, what I'm about to say. Folly released a new essay on Simone Weil today. And the power of words, and how capital words release people of the need to actually look into what it is to absolutize a concept, a word, and then speak of it in an all-embracing, all-encompassing way. I will link it so that you can read it yourself, because I'm fumbling up Folly and Veil completely, I imagine. But taking a word and thinking we know what we mean with it, but we never actually looked into what it means. Because if justice means, in your view, that which I am and which the other is not, you do not know justice. I am quite sure. Our society is in desperate need of a serious conversation around what is justice. Folly also speaks about how aligning with these capital letter words replaces or fills the God-shaped hole that is left in our society to many, because it connects us to something bigger, which we think we're obliged to do in order to matter. That's me throwing in my own words with him. Please do not go read his passage for his own ideas. We could really use a rethinking of what justice is, and what the good is. For that matter, what beauty is. It's not easy to reconstruct in a void of such great proportions. And that is probably why we cannot do it alone. Indeed, if we try, we will fail. But we also cannot simply be swept along by the herd. I'm looking forward to next week's essay on friendship. I haven't read Vale's piece yet. I was waiting. Let's hope the new season of light brings some enlightenment, at least in regard to what knowledge is. May the spirit of Sophia be with you.